Hello, collective listeners. On today's episode, we have Benton Ford. Benton is the head strength and conditioning coach at Idalou High School, also a middle school teacher within the school system, also the head cross country coach within that school system. So, really cool to kind of get his perspective on high school strength and conditioning. But then one of the coolest things I think just in coaching is in general is his approach to cross country, how he makes it kind of like this cool event that everybody wants to be a part of, getting hyped for them. Just a small thing that kind of echoes who he is as a coach. I first met him when he was interning for me for like 3 days, and then somebody stole him back immediately because they wanted him over there for baseball. So I was lucky enough to work with him for approximately 3 days. But in that time, I learned how great of a dude he is and how good of a coach he is and how much he's growing into his role within high school. So I appreciate you guys for listening. I enjoy the conversation, and I hope y'all will as well. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Benton Ford. Benton is the head strength and conditioning coordinator and head cross country coach at Idalou over in West Texas. We originally met when he was interning at Texas Tech. Absolutely crushed it over there. Everybody loved him. It was actually like hard. He interned for me for just a little bit, and then he got reassigned because everybody wanted to work with him. So it was tough to hold on to him. But I'm excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. Can you kind of just give us a brief background of your career, athletics, and what led you to Idalou?
Yeah, so I grew up pretty much only playing baseball, and coming out of high school, I um, I thought I wanted to do physical therapy, kind of like a lot of us do, and started going down that path, and just more and more started to realize, like, man, I don't really want to work with most of the clientele that you see with physical therapy. I just want to work with athletes, and I'm really not even sure if I want to do this anymore. Um, and it came to I got an email offering internships for credit through our department at Tech. And I remember like immediately looking at strength and conditioning and seeing the director Tori Stevens' name on there, um, and going, okay, maybe I need to check this out a little bit more and see if there's anything to this. And I went and sat down with him and was like, well, how did you get in strength and conditioning? He was like, well, I started out in physical therapy, realized I didn't want to work with them and wanted to work with athletes. So I was like, okay, I guess this is what I want to do now. And I was able to come on as an intern at their tech, spent, I think, 2.5 years, which is obviously where you and I met and very briefly got to work under you. And then after those 2.5 years, I finished my master's this past fall. And somewhere in that, I was able to get connected with Idalou, and they were able to kind of work a position so that strength and conditioning could be a big part of their athletic program. And then it also came with, like you mentioned, all that other good stuff like cross country and a little bit of teaching, all of that too. But it's been a lot of fun.
I mean, I love the part about West Texas where I feel like a lot of people, especially within Texas Tech, take care of each other. It's this environment where like Tori Stevens and Scott Ramsey, who runs the internship program, and Casey, they all really care and want to make sure that if you do a good job for them, they connect you and they try to get you to places. How did that kind of connection with Idalou first come about? Because we talked about it just a little bit before the call. And then how did that transition into the full-time position?
Mm-hmm. So the AD out here at Idalou was actually one of my baseball coaches when I was in high school. And so kind of by chance, he and I were able to reconnect. And then over the course of last fall into the spring, I was able to start programming for them and kind of start coming out here and shadowing. And really for me, it was seeing if I really wanted to be out at high school. Um, and for them, it was, I guess that's kind of where the interview process started to see if I was someone that they wanted to invest in. But we went through last spring where I got to program for them, and they asked if I would be interested in running their summer workouts, their summer off season for the girls and the boys side. And through that process, they were able to bring me on and work it so that strength and conditioning could be considered a sport. Where normally I would be an assistant football coach, I get to do just the fun stuff. So, but yeah, it was really, really cool for them to bring me on as just like, okay, this is going to be a great like summer thing while things are slow at Tech. And they're like, yeah, actually, we want to. We're going to make a position if you're interested. Uh, and then they were like, but you're going to have to teach seventh grade. So we were able to work it out.
I did. That's awesome. And I mean, that must have felt great, to transition. And then all of a sudden they have a new position open up and they immediately think of you. What was appealing to you about high school versus the collegiate atmosphere?
Um, well, as you know, we have at Tech, they're really fortunate to have a big staff. And so you get to be really, really specialized. You get to be an expert in your sport. And as I was kind of going through that, I felt like I was more pulled toward an environment of like a smaller university or the high school level where you get to be involved in a lot more things. And you get to really have a lot greater, I guess, kind of direct impact, which is really just a result of, you know, having less other support staff other than the strength coach. And so something about that was really appealing, to be in that position where I could work with more than just one or two teams, where I could work with a lot more. And then with high school, I was just really interested in the kind of the developmental side where, college, for the most part, you're getting more developed athletes, guys who are at least older. And at this age, I get to work with middle school some, but I mostly have 14 through 18-year-olds. So that's a big, big time of development, big window of seeing kids get to grow up, and then now just giving them the ability to feel confident in a weight room, and hopefully be able to implement some of the things that I learned from all the people a lot smarter than me at Tech to set them up well, whether they go play college athletics or not. Just trying to be a big consistent factor in their development, whether it's weight room stuff by itself or athletically, or just trying to show them like being a younger coach or a younger teacher, like this is a great career path if you're interested in it. But yeah, it's been really interesting to see that carryover from what it looks like to develop a college athlete, in any sport, to what it looks like to develop a high school person. Um, that's been a big change from Tech to Idalou.
Oh, I can only imagine. I mean, when you experience the collegiate level, I think every year people come in, especially our freshmen, more and more have been lifting already. Like they're used to it. I don't really have to teach them a lot of the basic stuff. But in the high school level, I mean, I started training when I was 12, and that was like I was a complete outlier, and it was just because I was
Yeah.
slow and I needed to do something to make sure I got playing time. But a lot of kids start training, when it really comes around to the time they get to like the varsity level for certain sports. But the second piece that you mentioned that I thought was really important and interesting was what you talked about is having the kids know that this is a potential career path as well. You alluded to it earlier. You and Tori both wanted to be PTs and then found out that strength and conditioning is what you're really looking for. I've done the same. I thought I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon, and obviously that's not the case. But I think the exposure to the career strength and conditioning is a little bit low. It's growing better, more and more. Especially as they create more positions for strength coaches. But have you had any students kind of express interest in becoming strength coaches or talk to you about it?
I've had some really brief interactions on the topic, which is really exciting because, like you said, I mean, my high school didn't have a strength coach. I knew that Tori, because Tori's oldest son and I are the same age, so I kind of knew Tori growing up. I knew what he was involved in. I didn't really know that that was something that anybody could do. And so, yeah, there's definitely been some kids who ask a little bit more. You can tell that they like being in the weight room, but they also like understanding why it's going on. I'm like, yes, dude, like keep coming to me with these questions. Like, let's keep talking about it. So it would be great to one day get to start like some of these kids graduate and come back as interns for the summer just to try it out, things like that. But yeah, trying to grow the field out here would be really, really cool.
I mean, seriously, it's the fun part of it, right? Because you get to see, the seeds be planted and then slowly grow them. And this is with this being your first year, I can only imagine that as we progress to next year and go on down the line, you'll have more time where it's less about you figuring out what you want to do with the position and then more about kind of helping out students who are kind of interested in that career path too. It makes it a lot of fun in my opinion, because we'll have some athletes every once in a while who are like, yeah, I want to be a strength coach too. And so I'll talk them through the process, and sometimes they're immediately like, "No, I think I'm good." After we tell them about the hours and the pay, but other times they're kind of cool with it. What are some kind of things that you have brought over from tech to implement within your program at the high school?
Um, yeah, at Tech, I got to work with the Olympic staff for most of the time, and then I got to spend a little bit of time with both of our basketball teams, just here and there. And so I got to see a lot of different approaches, programming wise, of course, but I think the biggest one was seeing how our different coaches at Tech interacted with different kinds of athletes. Like in a positive way, were a different person with softball than they were with baseball, or volleyball than they were with soccer. And so just seeing that you can still be yourself, but also be a version of yourself that works better with this specific athlete or with this specific person. That's definitely been one of the biggest things, because I'm not, at least coming into strength and conditioning, I was not the most outgoing. I was maybe not the most, uh, I don't know, never going to be the first to interact. And so seeing both being able to step out of that or grow out of that a little bit, but also recognizing the kids who do lean more toward that type of personality of like, yeah, like we can be cool as long as you stay over there type of a thing. Um, just learning how to approach all of these different kids was one of the big things. And then a lot of those people at Tech, still have been really, really good to me and still make themselves available for all of my questions about programming or resources or coaching styles. And that's been also one of the continued benefits, is just staying connected to the all the great coaches that you mentioned there, and then being able to say like, yeah, I remember when I tried that and it didn't work out, or I remember when I tried that and I wish I could go back to that, and things like that. So, um, but yeah, connecting, and then also just continuing to have people smarter than me being willing to pour into what we're doing at this little school 20 minutes out of town, has been a really fortunate thing to come out of it.
Well, I mean, I think that's a really key point about what you brought up about still being yourself, but interacting with other teams differently. I'm sure even as from strength coach to cross country coach, you're going to have to wear different hats and kind of act, differently with each team. How has that experience been running cross country?
Yeah, that was a big change, because I wasn't a cross country runner, and I never really had the desire to. So when they threw that into kind of this position, I was like, well, it's not that different. That's the conditioning part of the job, so maybe it'll be okay. Um, and then we got out there, like we had some meets where there's like thousands of runners from all divisions. It's like this is a whole different world that I didn't know was going on in this area. But yeah, those are, one of our coaches puts it really well. Like those distance kids, they're in track now. They don't get a lot of attention typically from coaches, and so they just need someone who's really going to be their biggest fan. Um, and figuring out how to do that, and also talk to really good cross country coaches, and try to put them in the best position to run well. It was a lot of fun, but it was a quite a change from the world that I was used to. So those kids are tougher and crazier than most of the other kids in athletics here. So it was interesting.
They're nuts, man. I remember my
Yeah.
senior year. I was hoping to go to college for shot put, and so our coach on the he ran cross country and then track and field, and so I couldn't play football anymore because of concussions, and he reached out and he was like, "Hey, I think you should train with us in the fall," because that was when the cross country was in upstate New York. Train with us, and then that way you can do shot put every day in practice, and then when it comes time to indoor and outdoor, you can actually compete. I was like, "Yeah, it's fantastic." And then what they neglected to tell me is that they still wanted me to run half the time with them, and so I'm like 225 pounds, just getting absolutely smoked by all these guys on the team. But it was like, they just train so hard, and it's a sport, like you said, it's a whole different world that people don't really understand, and you can see on their faces, like anytime you see a cross country picture, like the athlete is literally like, you can just hear like them just like groaning, because they're
Yeah.
pushing through, insurmountable pain. What was like the biggest thing that surprised you about cross country when you first started with them?
I, kind of speaking to some of the previous cross country coaches out here or some of the area, um, it's like a very, I don't know, I guess like a very polarizing approach to the sport. Like some people, we have a school out here that's like going to state every year. Cross country they're a cross country school pretty much first. And at district, they've scored 1 through 7 or 1 through 6. We were seventh, and then they were eighth through however many runners they had left. Um, and then on the other side of that, there's some people who are kind of like me, where it's like, you can come coach here, but you got to do cross country. Sorry. And so just seeing one of the biggest like surprises was people saying like, you can literally just get through this and the kids will be fine. I was like, well, these kids, a lot of them aren't, they're at cross country for a reason. This is their thing. Like I want to do them justice. And so I pretty much immediately went from, I'm going to do my best, but it's still just going to be cross country to me being like rampant at the meets, and I'm running around and screaming at them and getting excited, trying to celebrate their success with them. So I got really, really invested really, really fast, which was so much more fun than I thought it was going to be.
That's awesome, dude. But like exactly like you're saying, and I think other strength coaches here can kind of see similar trends or experience similar things because, like when I was interviewing here, it was like, yes, you're director of basketball performance. It's gonna be men's and women's basketball. And then like in one interview, they're like, and possibly women's golf. And I was like, wait, what? Like, and I showed up and they're like, are you ready for women's golf? And I was like, okay, but there are teams that are kind of fringe teams that don't really get the attention. And a lot of times these, oh, sorry, one second. My computer's tweaking here. All right, we'll just edit that real quick. All right. You all good?
Yeah, we're good.
But what I love about that though is that I'm sure these athletes get super jacked when you get that excited for them. And I think a lot of the strength coaches listening can kind of experience similar things, right? They are given teams that are kind of these fringe teams that typically have kind of inconsistent strength coaches, people who don't really, invest all their time within that sport. Because when I first interviewed here, it was okay. You're going to have men's basketball and women's basketball, and then like in one interview, they like whispered like, "And women's golf," and I was like, "What the?" Like I just didn't really know it was going to happen. And then all of a sudden, I'm working with women's golf, but they've always had a GA working with them, and so it's somebody
Mm.
who is a GA who got more excited about baseball, or somebody who got more excited about track and field because that's what they wanted to specialize in. And so nobody really spent the time to just like be with them every day, and it's no
Hmm.
knock to those coaches. It's just kind of how it breaks down sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure you feel the same. Like when you show them that you care about them and you really want to see their success and like go out to practices or, like you say, jumping up and down at meets and being happy for them. Like I feel like they reach a whole nother level of appreciation for their sport, but also success. I think it makes it so much more fun for the athletes.
Yeah, we got to have a little bit of success, and one thing that was really nice, really more exciting than the success, was that the program grew just a little bit. Like we had a boys team for the first time in a couple of years. Next year we'll have a girls team because we were able to kind of drum up. We were making people feel like they were missing out on what we were doing. So when you can, make people want to meet at 6:45 to come run every day, at least we were having a little bit of fun while we were doing it. So yeah, and now most of those kids, like, they also run track, or I have some that also played baseball, and so now I'm getting to see them do the other side, their other sport, and get to have a little bit greater relationship with them now, um, where it's like, yeah, we're part of this club or we're part of this team that none of these other people even think about being a part of. So it's it's been cool to get to know those kids both inside their running and outside of their running, and I think now they're enjoying me not yelling at them at 6:45 every morning to pick it up a little bit. So it's been good.
I'm sure they're loving that, but I can see
Yeah,
it in your face. I can see how much you care about them, and I think that speaks volumes to who you are as a coach. And you've kind of developed your own little like fight club out there. Like people are trying to get in, out in Idalou.
yeah. It's an exclusive club, and these kids, like I said, it was their thing, and I was like, well, if it's your thing, and we're both going to be out here, I guess it's going to be my thing. So
Yeah.
we're trying to start a culture out here. So we'll see.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully you create a cross country dynasty, and
Yeah,
I'll see you at the state championships.
yeah.
Do you
That's the
feel
plan.
that's the plan? There you go. Do you feel like that has helped you with the conditioning aspect for other sports?
It definitely has, because kind of like or at least a lot of the interns that I got to work with fell into all of my Instagram is about lifting, programming. All of my stuff is powerlifting and elite FTS and all of that stuff. And this was the first time that I was like buying books on running and buying books on conditioning, going like consuming conditioning media. And so just kind of seeing it both as the focus of the sport and then going, okay, how can I translate this to being, I guess, a supplemental factor to all these other sports was really interesting. And I went, yeah, I've had no idea what I was doing until I started reading from people who did. Uh, and the people who are going to know it best are the ones who do it every single day. So it was definitely a big change. Obviously, I'm not making my football team run, 4 or 5 miles before practice or anything, but going like, okay, this is how we build a base for cross country. How are we going to apply that same principle to football or basketball or whatever? And then this is how we're trying to get fast for cross country. How are we going to get fast for these sports? There was definitely a lot of carryover and a lot of just shoring up things. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is how we should condition to go. And like, yeah, this makes sense because of whatever. But yeah,
Well, I mean, again, it goes into that aerobic base. I'm a big believer in aerobic base
mhm,
for athletes, especially on my side of basketball. I used to not be, and I was like, no, you can just play the sport and get in shape. And then the first team I worked with at Texas Tech, the first year was so out of shape, and that was my fault because I didn't
yeah,
really understand how much actually went into that conditioning aspect. But that's the beauty of what you talked about earlier. Is in college, a lot of people kind of hyper specialize within one sport. They really get to know that sport to its fullest extent, which is good. But in a high school level, you are more of a general practitioner. You do have to work with multiple teams and wear multiple hats, so it allows you to actually take concepts from certain sports and then apply it to others, and then overall get a better product for the athletes. Versus the collegiate level, what are some challenges that you see on the high school level?
one of the biggest things, especially I was a 3A. I think our graduating class is around 60, maybe a little bit below 60, which means we don't have really anybody who specializes in a sport. I have a handful of guys who primarily play baseball, but other than that, I've got more kids than that who played football. As soon as football playoffs were over, they went to basketball, and then hopefully in 4 or 5 weeks, once basketball's over, they'll be able to come over to baseball, and so they're never in off season. They're never not competing at least twice a week. And then on top of that, a lot of these kids are farm kids, and so they're doing ag, and I've got a kid who leaves practice every day and goes and takes care of pigs. So that's just a really different kind of population than what I was used to growing up, and then also what we saw at Tech. Um, and so just kind of learning how to manage fatigue, for those kids who are constantly in season, but also go like, hey, I can't only hope that you get stronger in the end of May, June, July, and then we're back to in season in August. Like, we got to find ways to continue to progress you where we can, even though you're in season. And that's been a big challenge for me when it comes to programming and coaching. And it's also been a big challenge for them when it comes to like developing culture and athletics, or developing culture in the weight room of it's okay to get stronger in season. Like, it's okay to still train hard in season. We're going to be careful about it. We're going to be smart and do our best to not put you in a position to be, more tired than you can compete with. But I'm also not going to let you come in and do 3 sets of 10 curls every day so that you can stay fresh for your game 4 days from now. So that's definitely been a really, really interesting um, challenge on my side, and it really just is a constant kind of battle of, hey, I think you could put some more pounds on the bar right now, or I think you could do a little bit more on this, or like, man, good thing you're so tough. We can get through this lift together today. Um, that's been a big battle that a lot of my kids are probably tired of hearing, but it's paid off for them. So
I love the good thing you're so tough. That's a great one. I'm
that's
going to
a
use it later today.
that's a staple. They call me Coach Ford. They're like, Coach Ford, this is hard. I'm like, man, it's a good thing you're so tough. Like, we're gonna get through this. So
Mine, I'm kind of a jerk. I'm always like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry, I care. My fault. I care about you and want to see you get better."
yeah.
Um, how have you kind of approached that issue? Is it more of those daily conversations, like you're saying, smaller comments, or is it something with programming specifically? What are the ways you've kind of combated that?
It's been some of both, and I've kind of realized how little I knew, or how unconfident I was in my in season programming anyway coming in. Because a lot of coming up as an intern and training for certifications and stuff is write a 4-week off season program, or write a 16-week off season program. So that was one of the big things, was just what does in season training look like, not just on paper, but now that I have everything I've heard all the coaches talk about for the past however many years. I had this great perfect lift programmed, and then they couldn't execute in practice, so they're running extra in practice, or being able to adjust like that. But programming wise, I took a couple different approaches. Um, we did a tier system that did not work well with football in the fall. With my girls basketball team, this has been really exciting. I basically stole Corey Schlesinger's microdosing program that he does, and I was able to walk through the course that he does, thanks to Katie Munger from Tech, and implement that. And that's been really good for the girls, because their lifts are 15 minutes, and they love that. And the catch is, it's 15 minutes every day they're not playing basketball, and they're like, well, they've been willing to do that trade off. It's kept them fresher. I feel like it's kept them stronger. So that's definitely been the greatest success, programming wise. But the that only works as far as they're willing to perform, and me and the other coaches are willing to kind of push them toward continuing to develop. So, like I said, in the fall with our tier system, I was found that as a solution. I was like, this is going to be great. Like, this is, everything that he writes in this book is exactly going to solve my problems. And then it didn't at all, because kids either come in and they think 135 is enough for everything, or they're loading up 405 and it's too much for everything. And so just trying to get them to settle back down to what's heavy for you today, or what's, kind of the 7 out of 10 for you today. Where are we at? Like, can we get to that 7 out of 10 today? I don't care if it's your best lift or your worst lift all season. Like, let's get a little bit more, a little bit less, and just finding a program that makes that most clearly communicates that to them, I guess, is like, I can adjust here and I can go harder here, or if I can go really, really hard on my squat today, Coach Ford is okay if I take it easy on this other part. And it's like, yeah, because only one lift is important today. Like, I can take that trade off with you. But anyways, kind of rambling a little bit, but it's a big part of, communicating to them what the expectation is and what's important. And we try to say, I'm definitely stealing this quote. I can't remember who it's from, but major on the major, minor on the minors, um, and going like, no, you do not have to max out on every one of these things today, but you also can't coast through every one of these things. Like we got to find what's important. Let's make that really, really important. And then I'll throw you bone and we'll do curls at the end. Like a lot of stuff like that of um, communicating to these kids, you're going to be okay if you do this. And also you can do this. And it's going to help your sport ultimately. Like that's why we're doing it. And that sometimes that's a hard thing to communicate to them as well.
But I love that trade off though, because it does get them excited about actually coming in the weight room, and it's not just, oh, I'm going to have to do exactly what Coach Ford wants us to do today, and there's going to be no leeway on certain things, especially with in season training. Like I remember when I first got here, they were telling me like, oh yeah, last year in season we just do an upper body pump and then like a cardio flush and then leave, and I'm like, well, we're not doing that, like,
Yeah.
and now we just did, we're doing like partial range of motion, like pin squats and board bench press and stuff. And all the guys were like loving it because they're, going up to, like I put 205 on the bar. And it's like a set of 3 with like a massive board. I'm like, yeah, I don't care, dude.
Yeah.
I basically just want you to hold heavy weight. So go right
Yeah.
ahead, but they love it. And the more you can actually throw in things that they want to see, the more they're going to get invested in it. But I feel like that's even more important on a high school level because, they're not at that school for that sport, right? Or exactly like you said, like they have to go leave later and go take care of the farm. So like,
Yeah.
of course you want to give them a little something that can make it enjoyable for them to come in each day.
Hmm. Yeah. And I really, with our boys basketball, that was kind of one of my biggest fights because boys basketball it is really, really special to the coach here. And he was held onto it really, really tight in a positive way. But it was that battle of, I don't want to get them in the weight room because then they're going to be sore and they won't be able to play. And trying to be in communication with that. But one thing I realized is like if I program, 4 sets of 5 on front squat for them, it's terrible. They're mad when they see it on the board. They're mad coming in because they know they got to do it. But if I can do 4 sets of 5 on front squat and then I throw in some random hip flexor or ankle stretch in between, they're like, well, this isn't so bad. And really, I stole that from you, at learning how or figuring out how to sneak that mobility in. Where really the mobility is great, but the biggest benefit is they're a little bit more willing to go up in weight by 2.5 or 5 pounds when they've rested for 3 minutes, going through the stretch, and then talking as long as they can before they're reminded why they're supposed to be in there. Um, yeah, that's been one where it's trying to be sneaky and getting what I want while making them feel comfortable and confident in what they're doing on that particular day, regardless of game status and things like that. Um, yeah, it's a battle for sure.
Men's basketball is the tricky one, man. I swear.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Like women's basketball has always been really good in the weight room. Men's basketball is like, you have such a wide range of guys who like want to be in the weight room, love lifting all the time, and then you have guys who like are like the Kevin Durant's, who are like it doesn't help me with basketball. Why would I do this? And so I always call it the breakfast club because these guys will all get in a circle and start talking. And I'm like, hey, this isn't the breakfast club,
Yeah.
like with a couple of expletives in there. I'm like, come on, let's get back to work and everything. And we, the guy's like, oh, my bad, CA, my bad. It's like, all right, dude, come on, just lift. That's all you're here for. So, I mean, but again, you're giving them things that'll help them be invested and help them enjoy the weight room. Exactly like what you're talking about earlier. Like your goal is to help grow the field. And it's not like these people are all going to all become strength coaches, but I think a big thing that strength coaches can do to help grow the field is give positive experience to athletes, so we can kind of get rid of the stigma of the strength coach being this like hard ass who nobody he's not going to, let athletes do anything they want to do. And the weight room is exactly how they want it to be. Instead it can be something more enjoyable and a fun experience for people to come in on a daily basis. I mean, you're teaching science as well. Like, how are you balancing all of this, being the head coach for cross country, running strength and conditioning, teaching science? Like, what does that balance look like for you?
I was really fortunate, or I am really fortunate to have really great admin here. Like I said, the AD was one of my coaches when I was in high school, and my principal here at the middle school is actually his wife, and so she's kind of known me since I was younger. And um, when we were starting this, I was not super confident in my teaching ability. I'm not a teacher. I didn't go to school for it, wasn't certified in it, and I'm still not. And they've been really graceful and really patient, to say, like, we know that you're a first year, and the most important thing to us is that you continue to try to help these kids learn science, whether they like it or not. So I've been really fortunate with that. And they're consistently super supportive, checking in on me, um, and making themselves available when I do have questions, or how do I deal with parents? Because now I'm not a coach, I'm a teacher. Like, those are very different kind of approaches to parents being upset, or to grades not being there. And um, they're super patient, and they're great resources. And then the other biggest one is my wife, which really, I need to give her some credit for getting me out here as well, because they were like, she's a lot more valuable as a secondary math teacher. She does algebra 2 and pre-cal than I am as a coach. So she played a big part in them making an extra effort to get me out here. And she is a teacher. Like, she's a great teacher. She went to school for it. So all of the questions that I have, she's like, yeah, she's able to work through that with me and explain it to me. And I get to check everything with her. Like, hey, does this make sense? Would this make sense to a 12-year-old? And she, with her wealth of knowledge and experience, she keeps me going, to hopefully be, a good enough teacher for these kids while I'm here. So
Well, I mean, I love it because, it's exactly how it is with my fiance here. Like, everybody loves her, and so they try to make me happy so that,
yeah,
we can she'll stay,
yeah.
basically. But, it's extremely beneficial to have that resource as well, like you're saying. How was that first day of teaching, like getting up there? Because was it like coaching? Did it feel similar, or was it just a totally different experience?
Um, so like I said, I'd been around a lot of the high school guys for a while at that point, so I was pretty comfortable with them, the high school athletes in general, because I was with the girls too. Um, so I felt comfortable with them, but I remember standing in the hallway on that first day, and I was nervous. I was like, "This is not going to go well," because here in a second, I'm going to have. I think my first period at that time, I had 22 12-year-olds looking at me like I'm some teaching professional, and I wasn't. And I think I maybe had them fooled for a little bit, but they catch on pretty quick. They're like, kids' BS meters are better than we expect them to be. So they saw pretty quick, like, yeah, I'm not sure this guy always knows what he's talking about. And there's our bell. But yeah, it was really interesting, coming from college to working with high school athletes, and now working with middle school students. In college, when I was an intern, I think I was 20 when I started, and all of the athletes, I guess when you're in that position, they're like, wow, this dude must be so much older. So I was talking to guys who are like 25, 26, who thought I was older than them. And obviously I wasn't. And now I'm coming to high school and middle school, and they act like we're the same age. Like, no, we're not friends. I'm sorry. Like, you're 12. Um, Yesterday I had a student ask me, what's the difference between me dating my boyfriend, two 12-year-olds, and you being married? Like, what's the difference? And like, it's a different world, between me and you. But yeah, it was scary. And then over time, you just realize, like, they think I'm another kid with them. So that makes it a little bit less scary, but a little bit more frustrating at times too. So
I can only imagine because you're just bringing me back to I train some high school kids as well, and like they'll come in and they'll just like say some absolutely wild stuff. Like, it feels like they're speaking another language, like all this, like they're talking about like skibbity and something. I'm like, dude, I have no clue how you're trying to communicate with me right now, but I don't understand a single thing that you're saying. And again, like you said, we're not on the same level.
yeah.
It's a much different deal. Well, I think hearing what you're saying though, I think is it's interesting to me to see um, how you view how you instruct and how you do things versus how I view it, because I think you are, I can already tell, a fantastic teacher because you care and because how you approach cross country, right, and making it something where people can actually enjoy it, making it a cool thing for them to be a part of. I mean, I think you're doing a fantastic job. Like, you're absolutely crushing it out there because you care about them
Yeah,
and
thank
because
you.
you're building them up. You're doing exactly what you need to do at the high school level, which is make it a positive experience, right? Because it makes a massive difference on my end, at least in the collegiate level, because if they have strength coaches they didn't really like before, they don't like coming in, and there's already a
Mhm.
wall up, and there's already a barrier that I have to get over. So I want to thank you on my end, because it makes it much easier for me to kind of work with these student athletes. You know, how are you able to kind of still build relationships with them when there are so many athletes that you have to work with on a daily basis?
Yeah, there's thankfully there's a good portion of kids who, you know, uh, we every young athlete kind of felt they wanted to impress their coach. They wanted their coach to think they were cool and things like that. So I'm lucky to have a lot of those kids who, I don't want to say they look up to me. Like, that's not the case, but I'm still a coach that to them, at least a little bit in some way, is cool, and they want to impress. So that's um, definitely part of it. But then just trying to get them um, really outside of athletics. Like, I try to consistently walk around during the lift, like, "Hey, how was school?" Which is, what a dad question to ask, but it's like they're not expecting it from me. So sometimes we could talk a little bit more about it, or prodding them on grades in a way of like, "Hey, this is important," not from like a "If you fail, you're not playing." That they're hearing from their other sport coaches who actually have to worry about that stuff. So that's one big thing, and then also just this was kind of a one of the lessons that I tried to learn um, early is while I may be a little bit more experienced in the weight room than these kids are, obviously, that doesn't mean that there's no room for negotiation between how I want things to be done and how they can be done. Like, there's obviously non-negotiables with effort or with timeliness and things like that. But if we can nail these couple of things, like, I can give you room on these couple of things. And so I think that goes a long way with them too, of trying to educate them for the purpose of, I want you to be able to do this on your own, and not just be reliant on me, or not just go, well, I have to do this because Coach Ford said I have to. And so trying to give them the resources to do that well. And then also just at least, well, really with both, with the high school girls and the high school guys, and even my middle school students, just being straight up with them, and calling them out on their crap, honestly, like, goes a long way, with building that relationship. And it can be uncomfortable in the moment to have to call this kid out, but then, the next time it comes up, they know, like, well, Coach Ford's not gonna hound me on it like maybe another teacher would, and it's not gonna be a bigger deal than it is in that moment. And it also, like, yeah, maybe I am not being super cool right now. Like, just trying to establish those boundaries, and show these kids, like, I don't know how to talk to you like a teacher. So I've told kids, like, they're like, "Coach Ford, why don't you," my seventh graders will come in, they're like, "Why don't you come to our lifts anymore?" It's like, "Yeah, I don't really like you guys. Like, I don't want to be around you any more than I have to." And they think that's hilarious. And they're like, "That's fair because I don't want to be in your class any longer." I was like, "Yeah, you get it." Um, so just being honest and being real with these kids is a big deal for them. And I remember, like, my favorite teachers and my favorite coaches, and the coaches that I admired so much at Tech, were the ones where it was like we're walking out of the coach's office and we're continuing the conversation with in the same way with the athletes. With boundaries and things like that. But it's like you're the same person to your coworkers as you are to your athletes, as you are to your partner at home and things like that. Trying to be that consistent person that the kids can see of, um, that's been a really, really big part of helping them, or I feel like it's helped them see kind of who I am and where I'm coming from, which makes the things that I care about, they start to understand more, and the areas, where they can get away with a little bit more, they'll get away with it, and everybody's happy in that sense. So that's been a big part of developing those relationships and just showing them, like, this is what I want you to do to be successful, and this is what I don't care about for you to be happy, if that makes sense. So
No, it
that's been
makes
good.
complete sense. It makes complete sense. I think it also, it builds up a certain level of respect too for you as a coach, and then as in the weight room as a whole, because they know it's consistent. They know what they're going to get, and it's not like one day something's going to be a massive deal, and then the next day it's not. You're emphasizing the things that you think are important for their development, and then making sure that they still have a good experience. So I think it makes a massive difference as a whole. No. Well, Ben, dude, I mean, I've really enjoyed talking with you and getting you on, and just hearing how you're doing as a coach, because you're absolutely crushing it. If anybody wants to reach out or has any questions for you, what would be the best way to do it? Or if they want to follow you on social media, where can they find you?
I am on social media, not so much as a strength coach. I don't have my strength coach Benton page up and running just yet. But I'm on Instagram at benton.ford. Um, and then I can also be reached by email at bford@idalouisd.net. Um, yeah, those would probably be the two best ways, I guess.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you, man, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Connor.
Absolutely.